Is it just me, or is this album, Heyday by The Church, not quite the masterpiece that history purports it to be? Well, let's take a deep dive and find out. It's 1985 and The Church are in between albums. They've just had a successful tour of the United States, so they've laid the groundwork there. But they're following on from 1983 Seance, which was not hugely successful, and strangely two EPs, Remote Luxury and Persia, which didn't set the world on fire either. In fact, I remember when I got Persia, I was really excited and took it over to my girlfriend's house at the time, and I paid it the ultimate insult. I left it there. I don't know whether it was the electronic experimentation in something like Shadow Cabinet, which to me seemed like My Sex's Computer Games but done 5 years too late, or what it was exactly, but The Church went off my radar for a while. And so in 1985, the band reconvened in 301 Studios to put together their next album, Heyday. And interestingly, this time, Steve Kilbey wouldn't be bringing all of the songs in final demo form to the sessions like he did with Seance. The songs would be created by the band in the studio under the guidance of Peter Walsh, who had produced Simple Minds' New Gold Dream, and what a shimmering album that was. So the stakes were high and the gameplay was a little bit different. How did it go? The album starts promisingly with Myrrh. The guitars, bass and drums all pound and pulse their way to an exploding crescendo into the verse, over which Steve Kilbey sings beautifully and harmonics shimmer in their sonic wonder from the guitars of Koppes and Willson-Piper. It's a great start and we're underway into this album. But then we hit the chorus, and the chorus lifts a little but doesn't really seem to go anywhere. And I wonder whether we could have used a third verse rather than an extended outro. It also surprises me, I suppose a little bit unexpectedly, that contemporaneous video footage of them playing this song at the time always has them taking it out at breakneck speed, maybe making up for something in the original recording. Still, it's a solid opener to this album, and I'm not unhappy by that. For an album supposedly laden with hooks, Heyday for me has about the same amount as a Joy Division lineup, 1. And this one's it, Tristesse. What a glorious opening riff that is on the 12-string. Richard Ploog's drumming's precise. Steve's cool vocals over the top are amazing. I mean, why wasn't this the single, for God's sake? It's a beautiful song. I love the interplay of Peter and Marty's guitars under the verses, and then that sort of instrumentation as we build up to the divine final chorus. It's absolutely spectacular and a great song. I don't know if it's in my top 20 church songs of all time, but it's one which I would willingly play each and every time. And then that brings us to Already Yesterday. So as I mentioned, I was a little bit, I don't know, out of love, ignoring the church, not exactly waiting obsessively for their next album to come out. But I was driving around in the car and listening to the radio, and the DJ came on saying that the new church single was coming up real soon. So I listened in, and then I thought, there's got to be some mistake. They've accidentally substituted Field of Mars from the Blurred Crusade instead of the single. It's the same riff. And then the song starts up and I go, oh, here we go. It's another one of these nursery rhyme children's songs, a la It's No Reason. One was enough, and that's a better song. Something which would have been more suited to being on Donovan's Where You Love Like Heaven album, or A Gift to a Flower to a Garden, or something like that. It's an okay song. It's jingle jangle. It's got the descending chords in the chorus. I'm not a fan at all of the backing vocals. La, 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 and all that. It's not memorable for me, and so I passed on Already Yesterday. But interestingly enough, I mean, they named one of their compilations Already Yesterday. The current tour of Australia, or the tour that's coming towards the end of the year in November, it's called the Already Yesterday Tour. Got my tickets, that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it enormously. But I'll go to that show, but I'll pass on this song. And that takes us into Columbus. Now, Columbus really starts promisingly. We've got that ethereal sort of guitar whirling dervish sort of sound, which tells us it's about to explode. And explode it does into this strident riff that would not have been out of place on Spandau Ballet's Journeys to Glory album back in the day with the New Romantics. It's just too much for me, with that piano underpinning it with the guitars. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, the song itself is fantastic. It's a great rocker. I love the guitars, how they're building constantly. Ploog plays amazingly throughout it. The O Columbus section is beautifully sung by the band, and then we have a breakdown in the middle, which builds towards the end with some really psychedelic guitar, and it is one of the only psychedelic moments on the album, which is really great. But then as soon as we're just settled into that beautiful head trippery of it, we come back to dun 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 dun, and once again, contemporaneous videos of them show it without the piano, playing it live, show it without the piano, that riff not nearly as pronounced, and the song really works superbly. So a missed opportunity. Now, maybe I'm starting to note the presence of a producer here. The church and producers. Maybe we have problems. But still, I'm 4 songs in, and I haven't come across a masterpiece until now. Yes, it's Happy Hunting Ground, a song which Steve Kilbey talked about as being this loopy instrumental. It's glorious in every respect, from the drumming that begins the piece with the acoustic guitars, the bass line which presages Magician Among the Spirits, building all in this Eastern motif up to this glorious explosion of light and heydayness, which is my new word for today, a heydayness experience. Here, Peter Walsh gets it absolutely perfect in the second half with beautiful use of strings. It is majestic. It's no wonder it was so suited for their performance at the Opera House when they did their psychedelic symphony. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. The word shimmering might be used just a little bit too much to describe this album, with Peter Walsh's sheen and shimmer that he puts on top of everything to make everything pop out and shine. But here it's used absolutely perfectly. This is one of the great church songs, and definitely worth the price of admission alone. So let's flip over the disc to side 2 after what has been a fairly uneven side 1, and immediately we're struck full force by Tantalized. I gave you my experience of hearing already yesterday for the first time, but my experience in hearing Tantalized was somewhat different. It was a Saturday morning and one of the music shows was on MTV or something like that. I'm not sure what they were called in these days, and my research budget doesn't quite go that far. But all of a sudden, the film clip for Tantalized came on and I went, my God, that's the church. And I rushed out and bought that album almost immediately. This song is the church rocking at their hardest. I love the opening, the guitars provided by Marty and Peter, the shimmering, echoing attack that all build up to that explosion of vocals, and Steve's snarling lines coming over the top of it. That bass that just is probably, for me, his most psychedelic Paul McCartney rain-drenched bass line of all time is just brilliant, and it's so in the pocket, and it just builds and it builds and it builds this song until we go back into more psychedelic guitar instrumentation. And it's no wonder that this song has been used as a closer for so long, and closed and extended at the Sydney Opera House for their psychedelic symphony. I, in fact, when I heard that they were doing a psychedelic symphony, immediately got my tickets, only to discover that I was going to be in London for that day. I was going to be in London for a couple of weeks, but when the church were playing at the Opera House, I wasn't going to be there. So I dutifully and sadly gave my tickets to the Sunburnt Sailor, who assured me that he would go and see the show and report back on how wonderful it was, only to find out that he got sick and couldn't go. So there were 2 seats right in the middle of the Opera House where nobody was sitting that day. But it doesn't matter. What a great song. It's flawless. I still, to this day, think it's slightly overproduced. Do we need the horns in there, for example? And I can't remember what it is. There's another instrumentation during the orchestration, during the chorus, which is like little block chimes, percussion, which I think are like from a child's toy set or something like that. I could lose those as well. Still, it's a magnificent song. Disenchanted is up next, and initially I dismissed this song like it was a time to go to the bar and get another drink type song, or get a cup of coffee, or skip the song, hit pause, whatever, you get the idea. But a friend of mine encouraged me to have another listen, and I did, and I really now have begun to enjoy it. The shiny, lush guitar sounds are beautiful, a sweet melody. This is a beautiful pop song, and I've always, though, struggled with the childishness of the melody of the line, "So you get drunk, make a half-second jump and experience as the past." But, where else would you take the song? There's a great keyboard solo in the middle of this, followed by a Cinnamon Girl-esque Neil Young type of one-note guitar solo, which really works. It's a beautiful song, and it flows beautifully again. I'll say beautifully just one more time. After Tantalised, then takes us into the second side very promisingly. So I have been able to change my opinions on some of these songs, and this is one, Disenchanted. It's cool. Night of Light is up next, and it starts promisingly. It's got all of those things we want in a church song. It's got the jangling guitars, it's got the propulsive drums, it's got some of the most manic bass lines that Steve has ever produced. And then we go into the verse, everything's going well. This is a church classic, surely. And then we get hit in the face by the strings and the horns coming into the chorus. And it's just too much for me. I love the build up in the middle. I love how it builds to this crescendo at the end of the song. But then the horns and the strings come back. And I'm kind of getting a moody blues vibe towards the end as the song goes through its outro. But do you know what? I want my church with no strings attached. I should have seen them do it live at the time when they wouldn't have had the strings, but that was my mistake. I didn't get to see them. I was slightly out of love. And I was more interested in canoodling with my girlfriend, which might seem completely irrelevant, but it's not. Hear me out. There was one night when I was living near to where the church was playing in Salinas at Coogee Bay. I didn't live at Salinas. The church were playing there. And I was canoodling with my girlfriend one night, and a friend of mine said, "Why don't we go down the road to see the church? Because we'll get in there, have a great night, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "No, I'm more interested in canoodling." Anyway, so he goes, Now I had the only car. And so unbeknownst to me, about an hour later, the sunburned sailor sneaks into my bedroom, lifts my keys, goes outside, borrows my car, takes our friends down, has a great night watching the church play apropos around the time of this album. I had a great night canoodling and everybody was happy. But still, it was my mistake. I should have seen them at this point in time. Now, Steve Kilbey says that he doesn't want his songs to sound like they were made 20 years ago, but there's definitely some sort of a retro Matt Monro sort of vibe to this. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm going way too far. But as I said, I don't want my church with strings attached. Now, interestingly enough, with that story about the canoodling, the Sunburned Sailor and a couple of other friends of mine, we did a meet and greet with the church and Steve Kilbey when they played in Thirroul. I don't know how much it cost Steve to come and see us that day, but we're most happy to accommodate him and have a few words. And we told him the story about Salinas and the canoodling. And the one thing he wanted to know was, he asked the Sunburned Sailor, "So you checked it all out, didn't you? Checked out the canoodling, didn't you?" And the Sunburned Sailor said, "Yeah, he did." Well, who knows? What a story. But anyway, that was the only time I met Steve Kilbey, and he wanted to know about canoodling. I should be keeping score on this album, because on this side alone I've got 2 winners and 1 miss, and we're about to even up the score with Youth Worshipper. This just does not work for me at all. It's a very pretty song, lovely in every way, very melodious. Again, got sort of a moody blues vibe for me, but I'm not with it at all. And I really struggle with the hooves and horns and teeth and bones, gonna stitch you up where you come unsewn. And it comes in 2 or 3 times throughout. It's just, again, same as Columbus, that strident, powerful chorus, which, doesn't work for me. Now, I'm not going to turn the song off when it comes on, but I might just sort of cringe a little and wince a little. It's not my favorite. Have I said enough? Let's move on. Which brings us to the album closer, Roman. And here we start to rock out again. An Eastern riff begins, again giving us a sense of things that they would explore on Sometime Anywhere. And then with a little bit of feedback, we go into a full-out, overblown rock song. I love the dirtiness of the guitars in this song. Steve sounds a little bit low in my mix, but when, I don't know, maybe when you're talking about a Spanish mix, how can you ruin this cover, by the way? Well, you can put a big frame around it and a little promo thing over there. Steve sounds a little bit low in my mix, and I guess I'm just not a big fan of the chorus, "I'm never coming back again." It's a great instrumental section full of psych, but again, it goes a little bit short, which sort of surprises me a little, because if the idea was to go into the studio without songs and then jam on them and see where it would take you, it seems to be surprising that these have the least extended workouts of any church album up to this point. One would have thought that some really great psychedelic jams might have ensued from these moments of improvisation, and some of them might have been spliced in, kept, or extended upon. I don't know. Roman's an absolutely perfect example of something which could have gone out a lot harder and for a lot longer. Still, it's a very pleasing way to end the album, and I definitely enjoyed it. But maybe actually, maybe they employed Peter Walsh to rein them in a little bit, so to keep the songs relatively short. And I think nearly all of the songs they've got to be under 5 minutes, I would have thought. So maybe that was part of it, and he was sort of the compressor who was compressing all of these ideas into little pop gems. So that's how the album ends. Or does it? If we can just move into a parallel universe where I was the arranger and song selector for this album, I would take a song that was a B-side on two church singles, Columbus and Disenchanted, and I would place it as the closer in the album instead of, I just rip out Youth Worshipper. And that song is Transcending, a glorious stab of Middle Eastern psych, and another one of those punny names like Transcending, like Constantinople, constant in opal. It's a moody, surreal way to create bookends for for the side A and side B to finish. Happy hunting ground on the first side, and then Transcending on the second. The chorus really reminds me of the ecstasy and excitement that they would later develop in Pangea. And it's a glorious, vibey piece of psychedelic mysticism that luxuriates us towards the end of the album and really might just pop it towards its true heydayness. What do you think? It's a great song. I always like to finish my music reviews videos by saying, if music of any shape or size gives you pleasure, then who am I to argue or disagree with your opinion? And I'm not. I'm just sharing mine, because let's face it, there are albums by all great artists, and The Church are my favourite band, that just don't resonate as much with you as other albums. I mean, take for example for me, The Soft Parade by The Doors, Let It Be by The Beatles, every album by the Rolling Stones except for Their Satanic Majesty's Request. But the thing is that I would take The Soft Parade over nearly every album that was released in 1969, and I would listen to and take Heyday over nearly every album that was released in 1985, because these bands just set the standard so high. Anyway, it's been an absolute blast. I hope you're keeping safe and listening to lots of new music. And just as a little shout out, if you'd love to check out some of my original music, you can see it on the Institute of Pop channel down there. I'm putting up a couple of tracks each week, and I'm really happy with them, and I hope that you give them a shot. But until then, all the best, and bye now.